Welcome to the 10th episode of the Loki Sports Show. I cannot believe we're already on the 10th episode, but here we kind of are. This is going to be the Super Wildcard weekend recap. Long version, just because I know in basically a couple hours, I'm also going to make the TLDR version. That's going to be a short, so look out for that. I'll put the link to that once I'm done with that in the description of this video. But to kind of start things off, I started 4 out of 6 on my predictions. To 2 I got wrong were the Vikings the Giants at Vikings, and of course the Cowboys at Tampa game. Those 2 games, I said Tampa would win, and I said the Vikings would win respectively. That did not end up happening, but I'm still pretty happy that I got the Jags one right, because I was like the one I thought would be a real 50-50. But so far 4 out of 6 in the playoffs. But we'll get to each game as we go. I'm gonna go get base these games off the first time they aired. So basically, first game is going to be the Seattle Seahawks at the San Francisco 49ers. This was so far of the wildcard weekend, that was the first non-close game, and that was only one of 2 really non-close games. Every other game was relatively close. And this game was pretty contested for the first half, though, even despite the fact the score was pretty kind of uneven. The first half, they were up 17-16. When I mean the Seattle Seahawks. The main thing of the first half was that it was raining, the ball was wet. There was a lot of kind of discoordination on the 49ers part. They're just kind of getting warmed up still, if you want to just use that term, or they're just out of sync, while Seattle was firing on all cylinders, just because after a certain point people kind of expected this game to be far away from the get-go. The main thing would just be that Seattle and San Francisco have played each other basically 3 times this year, so of course after on the 3rd time, the Seahawks are gonna know what the Niners are gonna try to hit them with. They have a lot now in the playoffs too. We have the full season of footage. We have a lot more. They have a lot more footage on Purdy, on the whole how the kind of 49er offense works, rather than before, where we're still kind of getting used to kind of all the moving pieces. Debo wasn't there the second game, so now that they kind of, well, at least they know for sure what to expect. They kept it close, and then the main thing that kept Seattle in the game for at least the first half was when Jimmy Ward hit Geno Smith when he was sliding, and then that put Seattle in a field goal range. But the main reason why I feel that San Francisco was able to pull away, especially in the second half, was when one of Seattle's defensive backs twisted Debo's leg after the play was done, and then if you see the footage after, especially on the non-broadcast footage, there was a kind of like a big fly afterwards, and then even the head coach Kyle Shanahan got on the action and was yelling at the Seattle players. He was getting up in their faces, and then well, I kind of lied about that a little bit, because there was actually another point, which was when Charles Omenihu, one of the defensive linemen for the 49ers, knocked the ball out of Geno Smith's hand. Nick Bosa was able to recover, and then the 49ers were able to just go on a massive run after they had like 25 unanswered points. Just because what was going on was that Geno Smith looked out of sync. He started to play scared. After that, he threw a pick to Lenoir pretty shortly after he fumbled the ball. And then the only real thing after that was Seattle had one garbage time touchdown, which brought it to 18 points. But my main takeaway from if you're the Seattle Seahawks fan, don't really worry, honestly, just because this was supposed to be like a 3 and 4 year, like 3-4 win kind of year, 5 win kind of year, where no one really expected you guys to do anything. People thought it would be rebuilding, kind of seeing what the young guys have, and then of course no one really expected anything out of Geno Smith or Drew Lock or whoever was supposed to start according to like the preseason odds. But because of how things kind of went, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, they still played good. A lot of the rookies played really good. Charles Cross played good, especially Tariq Woolen, their new quarterback out of UTSA. Really good player, really fast player. He runs a 4.2. He was a wide receiver, and whenever time he plays, a lot of times if like a wide receiver ever does get past him, he has the speed to kind of close out and be able to defend the ball, which is a really nice trait to have, especially with how fast players are. They have this such a good rookie draft class in 2022 that they'll be fine. Their guys will still develop more, and then they also have a top 5 pick, courtesy of Denver, of course. So then they're gonna have more reinforcements. They have more picks coming up from the Denver trade as well. So they'll have more reinforcements. They'll have more players to develop. The main thing is, would they draft a quarterback, or are they gonna just try to re-sign Geno Smith? That I'm not sure about, because I know Geno Smith's supposed to be a free agent this year. I would assume he just gets re-signed to a pretty good deal, just because he played relatively well. I believe he made the Pro Bowl, or at least was a replacement. So they're obviously not want to pay him some money just so he can stay around, and then maybe he develops a younger QB and they pick maybe in the later rounds. Who knows about that? I doubt they'll try to grab one from free agency or something like that. So that is one thing I really kind of don't know about. But going forward, the Seahawks had a kind of a pretty good comeback year, especially how they were last year. So at least they have that to kind of hang their hats on. For the 49ers side, this game was everything they're supposed to do. It was a 7 seed versus 2 seed, even though it was like a divisional opponent. They were supposed The NFL put this game as the morning game for a reason. Morning for West Coast time, afternoon for East Coast time, of course, but it was in the early slot for a reason. It was the first game just so they can have, because they probably expected this game to not be super close. That's why they put it in. They didn't keep it close on the second half. They were able to run away with the game. But going forward, they will play the Cowboys, and the Seahawks will, since they have been eliminated, they'll just kind of have to wait and see on how the rest of the draft goes. There's a lot of kind of movement. So, kind of moving on to the next game, we have the Chargers at Jacksonville Jaguars, which would be the second game in that slate. And the main thing about this segment is that it's going to be a little bit more longer than some of the other ones, just because I have a lot to say about the Chargers, and kind of just going straight into that. The Chargers, as a franchise especially, are really pathetic after what happened on Saturday. Basically, they were up 27 points in a playoff game. They had 4 interceptions, technically 5 takeaways because Jacksonville also muffed a punt. So they had a +5 turnover margin, up 27 points. And I feel like any other team in these playoffs would have held on to that lead, but not the Chargers. And I know there's been like a lot of memes about how the Chargers blow leads, they suck in the second half. They always let other teams come back and they choke and all that stuff. But especially as someone who does podcasts and is supposed to be more objective, I thought, well, they're up 27 points. Let's see what they can do. I don't think they can blow a lead that big, just because it was 27 points with +5 takeaways. The Jaguars looked really bad. They looked out of sync, and the Chargers were just all over it. But going into the second half, they didn't run the ball. They missed field goals. Their defense was getting gassed because they were on too long, but their defense kept playing man to man, which also got them even more tired than just playing prevent or zone just so they can run out the clock and just get back possession on the ball and then just run it down. But my main thing was just gonna be kind of going on to that field goal point I made. I felt the Chargers special team was playing really good this season. I was kind of getting surprised after a certain point, just because Cameron Dicker, their kicker they signed mid-season, was playing really good. He had a high field goal percentage, but after a certain point, I was wondering, are these really the new Chargers? Are they gonna actually change, kind of turn a new leaf, or are they just gonna go back to the old way sooner or later? Especially when it's gonna matter the most, where they always missed field goals. Especially, I remember a game in the 2020 season when Herbert was still a rookie against the Saints. He drove them all the way down the field, and then they missed like a 40-yard field goal, and they lost in overtime. Like, that's just kind of the stuff that a lot of fans have come to expect of the Chargers, and it happened again. This was their game to kind of disprove a lot of these like easy narratives people made about them. And they kind of somehow enforced all of them. They blew a big lead. They had bad special teams. Their players were undisciplined. You see Joey Bosa on the sideline just throwing his helmet and all that stuff. And it's just not a good look at all. Obviously, they blew a 27-point lead, so that's not a good look. But it'll just, people always talk about that, but it'll just so many different things that kind of led up to that. And it's just way more problems than just kind of people are obviously blame Brandon Staley, Joe Lombardi, all that, all the coaches. They blame some of the players, but my main thing, kind of going back to that, is just going to be, it's not just like one coach who did bad or like one player or whatever. It's just a whole kind of segment. And then the one thing that really kind of gets me a little bit riled up is that a lot of like the media heads are always saying how like they don't think Brandon Staley deserves to be fired. They think they need to calm down, but it's like, you know what would have helped the Chargers score more than 3 points in one half? Probably having your second best receiver, or probably best receiver, depending on how you look at it, Mike Williams, healthy instead of playing him in the Week 18 game, which had no meaning against the Broncos. But of course, Brandon Staley played that game on Saturday. It's now Tuesday. He has not been fired yet. I'm not sure if they're gonna fire him, keep him. What's the story with that? Just because I know the Spanos family is pretty cheap, and I'm pretty sure they don't want to pay his salary when they fire him and then another coach, but still. They did fire Joe Lombardi earlier today, so that's why I kind of wait on these segments, because I want to see, are coaches gonna get fired? Are they gonna move on? Are players gonna say something kind of I can talk about? And to my surprise, both things happened, because also after the game, Joey Bosa was saying how he feels the refs are targeting him, how the refs are messing up the game, and a lot of stuff like that. And I'm not going to say he's not necessarily 100% factually incorrect, just because the whole game, I feel there was a lot of bad calls for both sides. In the first half, especially the Jaguars, I felt a lot of the receivers were getting held, were getting just PI'd every time, and then none of them were getting called, and then that's why it led to a lot of Trevor Lawrence's interceptions. It was just being really grabby, and they weren't letting them, they weren't calling anything, which it's the playoffs. They're probably not going to call as much things regardless. But in the second half, there was a couple offsides on the Jags. There was a couple false starts, didn't call. And then there was some holding on the O-line, especially against Bosa. That's why he was getting upset, but still. I don't think, yeah, Joey Bosa didn't really talk about that side of either, but still, the refs were bad this game for both sides. Both sides had kind of, if you want to just leave it up to make up calls, where if one receiver got PI, the Jags were able to kind of get away with like kind of like an early movement. So a lot of stuff like that was happening, and even if you do say, well, the first half the Jaguars got kind of got unlucky, but they got lucky the second half. The point is, the refs should not be kind of being so ticky tacky. One half, obviously, who's they're favoring in the second half, they favor the other side just so it doesn't look as bad on them. There should obviously be more of a repercussion for refs messing up the games like that, because if they actually call PIs, if they call a lot of those things on the first half, the Chargers probably don't get up to a 27-point lead, and then if they actually call the holding, they call some of the offsides on the Jags, the Chargers probably also don't blow that lead. So it's a lot of things that need to kind of happen so that I can kind of even itself out and be how it's supposed to. But still, obviously, for the Chargers, it's not just one thing that, going back to that point, those are a lot of things that led to why they blew a 27-point lead with a +5 turnover margin. Justin Herbert didn't fumble. He didn't throw a pick. It just, the Jaguars were able to dominate possession in the second half, and they're only able to put 3 points up in the second half. And then another thing that kind of goes back to the whole point of everything kind of correlates with the Chargers collapse. The main thing of Staley also, I don't know why he was having, I don't know why he didn't tell Joey Bosa anything. He wasn't, especially when he was throwing a tantrum on the sidelines, throwing his helmet, especially talking to the refs. Any real coach would have had it for sure that he would have kept his guys in check, have them calm down, make sure they're not getting themselves into unsportsmanlike penalties, technicals, whatever you want to call them. It's pretty easy to call them technicals, but just to make sure they're not getting in those unsportsmanlike conducts, because two of them and they're out of the game. That's another thing as well that also led to part of the collapse. I feel once things started to go more the Jaguars' way, the Chargers did not have energy. I didn't see Justin Herbert firing up guys. I didn't see their players saying, okay, let's go back, let's get some points, let's kind of make sure we extend the lead. I didn't see any of that kind of motivation that separates some of the good teams from the great teams. I didn't see that at all. I didn't see any of the coaches fire up their guys, tell them that to not worry, just to make sure they get points back, make some stops. I didn't see any of that. And it's just a lot of things that kind of led up to this point where we're at today, where Joe Lombardi got fired. I'm not sure if they're going to fire Staley. I wouldn't be surprised they do, especially when Sean Payton is supposed to be he's basically the sweepstakes for his services right now. A lot of teams want him so they can help their franchise QB. Like I can think that the Cardinals want him, Denver wants him, the Chargers want him, even Carolina wants him. A lot of teams, if Sean Payton's available, they'd gladly get rid of whoever their coach is for him if they're not even already fired a coach. So while the Chargers collapsed, obviously that's one part. We have to also talk about how the Jaguars came back, because it's a kind of a tale of two halves. As I mentioned before, in the first half, nothing was really going the Jaguars' way. Their receivers could not get any separation, whether it's because they were getting howled or whatnot. That's not really the point. The main point, the receivers were not getting separation. There was pressure on Trevor Lawrence's face 24/7. The Chargers offense was able to move down the field quickly, but then I'm not sure what Doug Peterson said in the locker room. Not sure what kind of happened there, but after that first half, they came on fire. They dominated possession. They're able to score almost every play they had the ball. They're able to, their defense was able to hold up against the Chargers passing game, and it was a full team. If they sucked the first half, it was also the part of the second half of why they're able to come back. Just the full team also having a lot of mental fortitude, especially Trevor Lawrence, because after 4 picks, you would think that you'd probably be rattled. You'd probably not want to take shots. You'd probably be scared. But after those 4 picks, when he came back in that second half, he was able to just completely light the Chargers up. He threw 3 touchdowns in the second half. He was able to basically do whatever he wanted passing the ball, because the Chargers defensive backs were tired. And then in the second half, Trevor Lawrence was also just absolutely feeling it, putting the ball wherever it needed to go. He was putting it in tight windows. It did not matter what coverage they were playing. Trevor Lawrence in that second half turned it on, and it absolutely showed of how they were able to come back from that really horrible first half. Then, of course, another aspect of that is the Chargers coaching absolutely sucked, and that's why they collapsed. The Jaguars coaching was able to really able to pull everything together in the second half. Doug Peterson, veteran head coach, and he obviously won that Super Bowl with Philly. And in my predictions, I remember saying outright that the reason why I felt the Jaguars would beat the Chargers is because Doug Peterson already had a lot more playoff experience. He's been in these situations before, down big, down against some really good teams, but he was able to come back, and he's won a Super Bowl doing that, especially with a backup QB. I knew for a fact Doug Peterson would outcoach Brandon Staley easily, and it was no surprise to me in the second half when Doug Peterson was calling the right plays, doing everything right as he was supposed to, and then that kind of came to a head where towards the end of the game, with like less than a minute left, when the Jaguars had a 4th-and-1 in Chargers territory, down to they needed a field goal to win. He called like a wishbone formation, like an old school NFL play. He swung it to ETN with like 3 running backs on the field. He swung it to ETN on the sideline, towards the sideline. ETN was able to make a huge chunk play, get in field goal range. They win the game. That was a crazy call, because almost everyone would have just sneaked it or just ran like a QB draw probably. But he had absolute guts to run that wishbone play in this age, of course. And then it got a big play because the Chargers weren't expecting, of course, but because he knew that ETN would be able to rip off a big run. And my main thing is just kind of a lot of question marks going for both teams. For the Jaguars, the main thing would just be they're happy. They won a playoff game. They won the wild card. No expecting them to even win the division and host a playoff game. And the fact they won a playoff game in front of their audience, of course, that's awesome. They won a wild card game. This is their first playoff win in a couple years. They're happy about that. Obviously, they're gonna have to go to Arrowhead next week. They're not gonna be able to host any more playoff games because every other team is a higher seed than them. But still, they made it to the divisional round, won a game. Their fan base is happy. This is the best Jaguars football we've seen in a while, and it's only get better from there because we have Calvin Ridley to come to that receiving core next year. Trevor Lawrence is probably going to have a big jump with that because a lot of QBs have kind of a big 30-year jump. Doug Peterson will get a little bit more comfortable too. We have to see how that defense develops. I bet they'll develop too. So, they have a lot of promise for their future. The Chargers, obviously, it's kind of doom and gloom for a lot of their fan base just because they blew that 27-point lead. But for me, it's pretty simple how they kind of get up from there. A lot of that was just bad coaching, bad play calls, bad schemes on both sides of the ball. They already fired Joe Lombardi, but I would not be surprised if they fire Brandon Staley. But the main thing is if they can get like a Sean Payne, that would be perfect for them. Sean Payne, he's known to develop QBs. He's always been a great coach. He helped New Orleans a couple years ago. A really kind of injury riddled roster, kind of not as talented as some of his other rosters. He got that to like a 9-win team, so it really can do some good things with any team. And this team is very talented. They still have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. So if he can get in the MLA, he can coach Herbert up, make sure that he plays more to what his strengths are rather than check down. Then I'm handing it to Austin Eckler. That would just change the Chargers' fortune completely. Of course, everyone kind of memes on them about their curse and all that stuff, but on a more objective level, I feel the Chargers are really just one coach away, and I've been feeling that for a while because remember last year, Brandon Staley, and with the playoffs on the line, the final game of the season against the Raiders, all he had to do was not call a timeout, and the Raiders probably just let the play clock go down just because if they tie, they both win, and then they both go to the playoffs. So, well, they don't win necessarily, but they both go to the playoffs, so they basically will be fine. But you call that timeout, and then the Raiders weren't really planning on kicking the field goal. Even Carr and Rich Bisaccia said that, but when they called the timeout, they kicked it. They got eliminated because of that. And then this year, he got Mike Williams hurt just because he played him in a meaningless Week 18 game. He got Joey Bosa banged up as well in that Week 18 game. He blew a 27-point lead. If we had just like an average head coach who doesn't call that timeout, who rests his starters in Week 18 and doesn't blow a 27-point lead, the Chargers' fortune would be much more different. But because how awful Brandon Staley is, that's just how it is, and that's why they're in that situation where they're a very talented team. They're still a very talented team, but they got on the first round, and that's kind of what I have to say about that game. Obviously, as I mentioned before, a little bit more of a longer segment. I've been on this segment for almost like 16 minutes now, so yeah, I had a lot to say about how the Chargers collapsed, how the Jaguars kind of, were able to come back from that pretty nicely. So I want to be moving on right now. The next game would be Miami at Buffalo, of course. This was one of those games I kind of didn't expect to be competitive, just because the way I thought about it would be Miami is showing up freaking beat up, banged up. They're on their third quarterback right now with Skylar Thompson, who's a 7th-round rookie. I thought the Buffalo Bills would really show up and just absolutely dominate them, kind of send a little bit of a message to everyone else in the playoffs, but that's kind of what did not end up happening. Miami showed up. They were in the game for a while, and then they had the Bills completely on the ropes. There are some points where when they were up, like team they were up like 20-17, Bills Mafia had no energy. Miami completely went in there and met business. How at one point, the thing is what's crazy is that they were down 17 points, but they kept just chipping. They had like 3 field goals. They kept chipping away. They're able to get a 2-point conversion going. And then the main thing of this game would be kind of, if you look at the box scores, you kind of think, oh well, Skylar Thompson sucked. Well, what happened here? How did this game get close? And I think the box scores are kind of a little bit misleading this game, just because a big part of why the Bills probably did get away with this game is just because, especially in like the first 2 quarters, the first half, Miami's receivers dropped a ton of balls. They dropped, especially Jalen Waddle dropped like 4 passes. Terry Kill dropped a couple passes. That's what really kept Buffalo from really going down at any point too big, or Miami from really going down, just because, well, Skylar Thompson threw 18 of 45 out of 45, 220 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Those drops really did to an impact, especially when a lot of those were like big 30-yard plays, 40-yard plays, that if Jalen Waddle was able to haul in, that could have really changed how a lot of those drives kind of ended up going. And then another thing that did kind of help Miami a lot was their defense. They let up 30 points, but one of the big things they did was when they had a crazy blitz, they blitzed, like an all-out blitz. One of their defensive linemen basically just absolutely smashed Josh Allen, and then it was a scoop and score and took it to the house. That's how they were able to get up during the second half. And that kind of concerns me on the Bill side of things, because I think one thing people are kind of, I'm not sure, hyping up, or I'm not sure what necessarily the term would be, but one thing that's kind of concerns how everyone kind of shoots horns of men as like AFC champions, Super Bowl favorites, when they still need to get past all their opponents. Of course, that's obvious. But the main thing was, like, Tony Romo was calling him Mr. January, when I love, like, Josh Allen's obviously a good guy, but he hasn't won the AFC. He's never been to a Super Bowl. Like, how is he Mr. January? He's not even made a Super Bowl. Like, that doesn't really make sense. But obviously, they were hyping him up, of course. But one thing about Mr. January, if you will, is that his turnovers are really becoming a problem, because he had 3 this game. That forced fumble they mentioned, and then he had 2 interceptions this game as well. And a lot of it is just because he absolutely plays recklessly, especially whenever he sees the receiver kind of this, if it's just relatively open, like it can not even be fully open. If he just sees the receiver going like a go ball, whatever, he'll just chuck it into double coverage. He'll just chuck it if whatever else is, if there's something else kind of available for him just to go with the ball. And that's one thing that kept Miami in the game, was that he would just try to chuck up passes. They got picked off obviously a couple times, and then if they get incomplete, then it would just only take off so little time off the clock, and then their offense came back on the field. And the main thing about this would be, if Josh Allen was that reckless, just starting it up in the air, causing losing the ball, fumbles. If he played like that against the Bengals or like the Chiefs, they're not winning that game, because they got lucky by the fact that Miami had no Raheem Mostert, didn't have Tua or even Teddy Bridgewater, and Jeff Wilson was kind of banged up during the game. If they did those mistakes against, as I mentioned before, like a Cincinnati Bengals or Kansas City Chiefs team, they lose that game, because Mahomes or Burrow are not going to mess up on those opportunities, especially if they're taken away by their defense in a close playoff game, which obviously next week they play the Bengals, so we'll have to kind of wait and see on that. But still, we have to kind of temper the expectations for the Bills a little bit. This was not their best game, obviously. It kind of goes back to the point I made with Seattle and San Francisco. Obviously, it's a divisional opponent. At this point, there's nothing that they can really pull out that they don't know. They have the full 18 weeks of footage now. They have the 2 footage from the last games to go back to see where they can kind of shore up mistakes. And that's what the Miami Dolphins did. That's why they were able to keep in the game for so long, even if they were nowhere near on the team talent level today, with how much injuries they had. Still, the main thing that also kind of concerns me is that the Bills won the game just because they got really lucky at the end, where they had like that was like a kind of basically a 4th down to ice the game. That's what it was. It was like an 8-yard run from Devin Singletary. Then the main thing, or it could have been James Cook. I have to look back on that. But basically the point was, it was like maybe like a yard, kind of half a yard short of the 4th down mark, of like the 1st down, and it was on 4th down. So obviously the main thing was, if you're Miami, you still have one more shot. You can go in there, make a stop, get the ball back, and then hopefully be able to get down the field and score. But the main thing what happened was that the refs gave the Bills a super like quick extra half-yard mark, and they won the game because of that. Miami didn't have a chance to respond because the refs gave them the extra yard or so to convert it. And if you look at the replays, obviously you can see that they gave them, it was a very generous spotting. But for me, my main thing is, if you're Miami also, even if you do say, oh well, the refs kind of sold the game, I do believe in that, but I also believe that Mike McDaniels kind of had a really struggle this game, because there was like 4 delay of game penalties, and their last drive with the ball, oh my god, there was like 2 delay of game penalties after they called it a timeout. It was not a good look at all. They were not able to get the ball going. They're not even able to snap it right, get the plays going, and that's what led them to have a 4th and 1 kind of field goal drive to a 4th and 6. They ended up punting the ball. That's how the Bills were able to kind of get lucky with that spot. But still, Miami should have not had those kind of miscommunications to lead to that point, but still. So now it's kind of where the main takeaways between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. As I mentioned before, for the Bills, you have to kind of be a little bit more worried now because it's not as clear cut favorites as you think, just because the Bengals and Chiefs are still there. And if the team's mistakes of turning the ball over, fumbles, and interceptions, and their defense letting up 30 points, well, I understand basically 24, but still, that's two Skylar Thompson and a pretty banged up Miami team. That's what's going to happen when they play the Chiefs, the Bengals, or whoever that come out of the NFC. If that's the Eagles, Niners, Cowboys, whoever, what's going to happen there if they have another performance like that? For Miami, that's the main thing is going to be get healthy, see what they can kind of do, probably help their defense a little bit more, because I know there were some points where they're just getting burnt on those deep balls. Where I mentioned before, Josh Allen is reckless still, but there's just some times where it'll just be so free for the Bills to just chuck it up, and then they're able to get at least one receiver on a go route or kind of a streak going. So you'll have to see what they can do to get more defensive help. And then the main thing is get Tua healthy, get kind of Raheem healthy, get everybody healthy, and then just run it back to see what this team can be when obviously their guys are not just completely and utterly banged up on IR, all that stuff. So I don't think you should be too worried. And for Miami, other than maybe also Mike McDaniels needs to absolutely get the play calling situation going. Make sure he's not burning timeout. He burnt so many timeouts just because their offense didn't know what was going on. It could be because Skylar Thompson, obviously he's the third stringer, but still he's already started a couple games this season, so I don't think that's a problem. But still, going back to that, getting the whole offense, getting play calling, getting everything on the same page, all the things they can improve on. But still, no one probably expected them to put up a good fight like they did. And if how bad their second half of the season went, no one probably expected them to even get this far either. So we have to give them credit. They made the playoffs. They're a 7 seed against a 2 seed. And a 7 seed has not even won a game yet. So they did what they were supposed to do, make it close, make it competitive, and kind of at least give the fans a little bit more hope for next year, of course. The next game I would want to talk about would be the New York Giants at the Minnesota Vikings. And this was it's kind of hard to describe this game because in reality, both the Giants and the Vikings are kind of funky teams. They both had bizarre seasons in a lot of ways. The Vikings had a streak of 11 wins and one-score games, went 13-4 with like a negative 10-point differential. And then, of course, the Giants were 9-6-1 at one point, or actually 10-6-1 now. They were able to win one of their last games. But the main thing with the Giants and the Vikings would be they kind of were able to pounce on they're able to win a lot of close games, a lot of gritty games, a lot of games people probably didn't expect them to win. But then against some of the more big boys, that's when they absolutely got shredded. Like mainly Philly and Dallas shredded them both. And I know the Lions both beat both of them actually. So they had a lot of big losses to kind of some of the more better teams in the NFC, especially the Vikings. But still, the main thing is who would I know this would be a close game. A lot of people expected this to be a really close game because both teams do not really blow other teams out. The only blow I know for the Giants had would be that Colts game. They blew them up like 30 points. I'm not sure if the Vikings had any blowout wins, but still, the Vikings did have a lot of close games. They're able to win a bunch of them, unlike last year where they lost a ton of them. So it'd kind of be interesting to see how that would kind of match up. And then, of course, this was the first Vikings home game in like 4 years, or like 8 years, or not 8 years, 4 or 5 years since like 2018. And then this was also the first Giants playoff game since 2016. And this would be eventually the first playoff win since 2012, which, for reference, I was in like elementary school in 2012. So that just shows how, and I'm in college now, that shows how much time has gone since they've won a playoff game. But another thing that kind of led up to this game was, whether or not the majority of people had the Vikings kind of frauds, like a pretender, fake team, nothing to take too seriously in the NFC. Kind of like how last year for the AFC was the Titans, who everyone called frauds. And unfortunately, this game, kind of like the Chargers game, all those kind of negative um narratives, those easy kind of things people point out with stats for the Vikings did unfortunately come true, where they had a really kind of bizarre season. They kind of got lucky in some of those one-score games, and it completely showed. Obviously, just because the main thing with this game will just be the Vikings defense did not show up at all, and they let like 31 points up to the Giants, who the Giants are they're a playoff team for a reason, but even so, the fact that they're letting basically Daniel Jones run all over them like he was Lamar Jackson. Like Daniel Jones had an insanely good game, like 2 touchdowns, no picks. He was super efficient. He had like no like pressure. I feel like a lot of the time he was just doing whatever he wanted, and that was crazy because the Giants are a decent team. They made a playoff. They made the playoffs for a reason, but they made them look like they were one of like the best offense in the league when they're right middle of the pack. So their defense was absolutely miserable. And I know a lot of Vikings Twitter, a lot of Vikings fans, I have a lot of Discord servers, have a lot of kind of friends who are Vikings fans. They're all saying how they wanted Ed gone and Ed Donatel gone. And I've not been watching too much Vikings games. Well, after like especially like the film, but especially after this game, I really understand why they wanted him gone. It's because it's one thing when the best player on the Giants offense, Saquon Barkley, runs all over him because he's a very talented player. He's a very good player. He's proven. We all know he's capable. But when Daniel Jones, who was on like the super hot seat to getting replaced this year, is just throwing dimes. He's running all over. He's extending plays with his feet. When he's dicing up the Vikings defense, then I understand why. Oh, there's probably some concern there. And then another thing with kind of going back to Jones, a lot of his receivers, I'm not trying to be like overly critical or like trying to just be a jerk, but the main thing with a lot of those guys were on practice squads. Like Isaiah Hodgins, who absolutely went off this game, he was on the Buffalo Bills practice squad earlier this year. Like a lot of these receivers are not your top quality guys, not like first rounders or anything crazy. A lot of these guys are just kind of guys you're able to pick up and like undrafted guys, late round picks, practice squad guys, and these guys were just able to create space. They played so good, and after a certain point, dude, this Vikings defense just did not have what it took at all to kind of keep up with the Giants. Very basic but very effective passing game, and then the main thing, another reason why Minnesota lost. This one's kind of the main storyline for a lot of the media because Kirk Cousins threw that one check down on the 4th and long that lost on the game. But the main thing was also the Vikings offense completely fell apart without Justin Jefferson. I talked a lot of positivity towards Justin Jefferson. I think he's a very talented player, great player. But this game, he really did not perform good at all. Let's see how much yards he had this game, because the main thing which really kind of held him back was that he had 47 yards off of 7 receptions, no touchdowns. So the main thing which kind of led to such a low productivity when normally he averages like 100, like almost 100 yards a game, is just because the Giants were playing a bracket defense against Justin Jefferson like almost the whole time. Like probably a little bit after the first quarter, because I know the first drive he was just getting everything, but after that he really just kind of had no separation because the Giants were committing so much of their defense, so many players do stopping him. They always had one cornerback, and then whenever he'd go like more than 5 yards out, they'd always have like a safety on him. If they had I think a linebacker, he was always bracketed, always double teamed. And then they was able to open up some hole, especially for TJ Hawkinson, who was getting a lot of the passes, then Dalvin Cook as well. But the main thing is, if Justin Jefferson is not absolutely getting every catch on almost every play, this Vikings offense really sputtered, and that's another thing that kind of got blamed on Kirk Cousins unfairly, but that's just more to do so of how it's kind of set up. It's so set up where Justin Jefferson's kind of like the workhorse. He catches everything. He catches deep balls, like short ball, anything that they throw at him, he can catch. But with how the Giants played, to their credit, their defense absolutely, that was going to be a tough job no matter what, and they were able to have a very good, very well put bracket defense on Justin Jefferson, which obviously led to the Vikings scoring 24 points, and then that's kind of another thing that kind of carried the Vikings as a team to hold together. Their offense would always put up 30 plus points, and if they don't, their defense would let up that much points, and then they lose the game, and that's kind of what happened today as well. So the main things also kind of going forward would be, well, for more so the Giants side, I'll talk about that first. They really overperformed this year. They went above all expectations. People thought maybe they'd be like a 5-6 kind of win team, nothing crazy, probably a mediocre, maybe like a below average team. But Brian Dable got these guys to the playoffs, winning record. They won the first playoff game since 2012. They went on the road to beat the Vikings, and then even if they don't win against Philly next week, because that's who they're going to be playing, they still, the fact they still made it this far, they won a playoff game, still a very great season for the Giants, the best season in a very long time. Obviously, I highly doubt Philly's gonna make a lot of the same mistakes the Vikings do, so I don't think they'll get past that round. We'll talk more about that later, but still, they made it to the divisional. They have a chance to upset one of their divisional rivals. We'll have to see how that goes, of course. But going to the Vikings side of things, I know a lot of Vikings fans don't want to hear it. They want to, especially with how defensive they are, of how they always were trying to defend their team from a lot of the media narratives, but they have to face the music, and this was probably one of their last years to really contend. Just because they have $8 million over the salary cap. So that means as of right now, assuming they don't sign any draft players, any free agents, they're already over next year. So they have to cut a couple players, let them go, and it's very possible Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, and a couple others have played the last games in Minnesota. I don't know if they'll go to other teams. Maybe Adam Thielen will retire. Who really knows? But I doubt the Vikings want to pay them the money that they're looking for, or even just so they don't have on the books, so then they can obviously kind of retool the roster a little bit. So who knows what's going on with that? They're in a financial situation. I don't know if they'll pull like a Saints or like a Packers move. Will those kick the can down the road? Just try to keep their contending window a little bit open a little bit more longer until they can kind of situate that going forward. Well, at the end of the day, they have to figure out something to do with the financial situation. Nextly would be, are they going to overhaul the defense entirely? Are they just going to fire Ed Donatell and hope he was a problem and then another defensive coordinator can come in and clean up the scheme? What happens with that? Who really knows exactly? But still, very tough loss for Minnesota, even if no one was really expecting them to make a run. A big part of it just comes down to they were able to win a lot of those one-score games, maybe inflated the record a little bit, and then a lot of Vikings fans, a lot of people who believed in them, thought they would be able to make a much deeper run than that would kind of happen, but unfortunately, a lot of that did end up catching up to them, and they lost in the first round. So now, then, of course, on the Sunday night game, we have the Ravens at the Bengals. So, this game, there's a lot of things to take away from it, of course. The main thing for me was that the Ravens coaching really costing them the game for this. Going into this game, I think a lot of people knew it was going to be a little bit, kind of not completely low scoring, but maybe less than like 30 points on for each team scored, because the Ravens have a seriously pretty gosh darn good defense. You got Roquan Smith, who's been playing really good, and so the main thing they're gonna have to do would be they have to stop Joe Burrow and his cornucopia of kind of weapons from just taking over the game. To their credit, that's what they did. Really, the Bengals really only put up like 17 points on offense because their other score was because of a defensive play. But other than that, like Jamar Chase had a pretty good game. Other than that, nothing else really was showing up. Joe Burrow, especially in the second half, lost 3 and outs. So the main battle was between the Ravens offense and the Bengals defense, which I have to give some credit to the Bengals defense. They've been underrated for a while now, but this game, they're on the field for a while because I think with the Ravens, they're similar to my 49ers in the way where they don't play necessarily like almost 90% of other teams where they want to have big plays, just pass it, keep passing it, pass it in the first downs, the later downs, where they just want to throw it to wherever their best receiver is. The Ravens offense is more so they just want to run the ball, and if they have like an opportunity to get a big chunk play, a lot of it is going to be running with if Lamar is healthy, they run with Lamar. Even if Tyler Huntley sometimes and the other Anthony Brown, they'll run it with on the quarterback sometimes. But a lot of the time, they run it with J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. They'll run it with those two guys, and then of course they have Patrick Card, who sometimes they'll do like a short pass to, or as well for the fullback, and then going further from that, they have like their tight ends with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, always getting kind of some of those chunk plays, kind of being like their safety blankets, some of their like certain short situations. So they play pretty physical. They're always trying to run. They're always trying to kind of keep the other offense off the field. And that's they did stick to that game plan. The only thing is with how the difference of why the Ravens are one way and why the Niners are not is because at least with the Niners, they have a lot more talent with their receiving weapons. So if they have to get in a situation where they need to drive down the field, they have Debo, they have of course George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan, all that kind of stuff. Because the Ravens don't have the same luxuries as the 49ers do, even if they play pretty similar physically wise and the amount of time they want to run the ball, they don't have kind of like the passing game. There were a lot to kind of fall back on. For them, the main reason why they've been limited, at least the last few years or so, because for them, it's if they're not running the ball and if a team stops it, or if they need to get down like in a 2 minute situation to just go down and score quickly, they don't have that same kind of that same kind of ability to do so. Whether that's because of coaching, whether it's not because they get enough receiving help, that's not really the topic there. The main point is that's just how it happens. And then what happened is that the Ravens had a really good drive. They ran the ball a lot, short passes. They were in like the 2 yard line in the Bengals territory. And then what happened was their second quarterback, Tyler Huntley, he reaches so he can get the touchdown at QB sneak. That thing is, when Greg Roman called that play call, it was a little just too far out rather than just doing on the 1 yard or like half-yard line. They did it from 2 yards, so they gave the Bengals a little bit of an opportunity to just punch that ball out. And Sam Hubbard, the defensive end, who's a really underrated player, by the way, I might make a video on him. He's a very good player. He punches the ball out and he just takes that 98 yards to the house, which is one of the longest defensive touchdowns in postseason history, and I believe the longest scoop and score. But he absolutely just runs with that all the way down and he scores a touchdown there. And that's why I believe that was a turning point of the game. There was no real other play. That was the turning point when the Ravens were able to kind of go down the field methodically as they normally do. But because they coughed it up, and then the Bengals were able to get the 7 point cushion instead, the Ravens were off their game. They're not able to do the things they're good at and things they want to do with, as I mentioned before, mainly just running the ball, short passes, maybe some chunk plays. But because of how their receivers and their running backs are not, much more so that the receivers are not very talented, while the running backs are pretty much very so. Between Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, they were not able to kind of able to score back, and that's how the Bengals were able to win the game, kind of hold on a little bit. But the main thing would just be another reason why it kind of goes back to why the Ravens are not able to adapt as well as other teams who kind of like to run the ball, is because their coaching is very suspect, and a lot of people have been defending John Harbaugh, but my main thing was at the end of the game, the Ravens did have another chance to tie it up after they lost that fumble. But what happened was it was less than 2 minutes. It was going down to like less than a minute, and then John Harbaugh would not take a timeout. He wouldn't call a play, so it took like, by the time everything was said and done, it took like 50 seconds for, of course, everything to for them to actually run a play again. But the thing is, 50 seconds they did not take advantage of. They didn't run a play. They didn't do anything. They didn't call a play. And if they didn't call a play, of course, they didn't use that time to call like their best play to get in the end zone and nothing like that. It was 50 seconds of burnt clock, and he had 2 timeouts too. It's not like he used them all earlier and then they're just trying to get set. It was 2 timeouts left. John Harbaugh did not use them. That's probably what cost them the game, because with how close it was, where Tyler Huntley threw a Hail Mary into the end zone and the receiver approached the third, almost caught the ball. If they had probably a couple more yards, a little bit of a closer field, they probably get that touchdown. Maybe they send it in overtime. Maybe they go for 2. I know how Harbaugh is aggressive. Who knows with that? But I felt that was a very missed opportunity for him to not use those timeouts, to not call anything. And obviously, that's kind of unfair for me because I was on an armchair coach. I didn't really have. I wasn't on the field of on to make calls, but still, I used from watching the game from my TV. I was like, why are you not calling timeouts? What's with this time management? Especially with earlier in the video, I was already kind of on Mike McDaniel's for his time management for all of the live games. But Mike McDaniel's a first-time head coach. It's his first time calling everything by himself. No Kyle Shanahan. John Harbaugh has been in the league for like 10 years, like over 10 years now. Why is he doing? Why is this time management this? I'm not really sure. And then and a lot of people are just not giving him that criticism. I'm not sure why. Just because I understand he won a Super Bowl almost 11 years ago at this point, 10 years ago. But that's almost 10 years ago at this point. And right now, if he would have called timeout, used the clock a little bit more sparingly, and to his advantage, who knows what could have happened in this game. I'm not sure if they win, of course, but I would have looked a lot closer. It could have been closer as well. And the fact just no one is blaming him for that. No one saying, hey, what's up? People are more than glad to call Mike McDaniel, Brandon Staley, and those coaches obviously messed up too. I'm not defending them right now, but why are those coaches getting absolutely hammered? But I hear nothing about John Harbaugh when he messed up the last couple minutes of that game. I'm not sure. Another thing is, but going back to how the Ravens can only play football on the offensive ball, offensive side of the ball, to clarify a certain way. Greg Roman has a really one trick pony. If he cannot get that running game going, he really kind of doesn't have a way to kind of adapt going forward. And then that's really shown to fault Lamar. So who knows? I'm not sure if they'll both be fired. I'm not sure if there's any rumors about that. I don't think so, but still, they have some very suspect coaching right now. And the main thing with the Ravens going forward is what's gonna happen with Lamar Jackson. Everyone knows it. You can't really run away from it. You can't really shy away from it. Any team that doesn't have a franchise QB, like the Jets, maybe the Dolphins. I know, like, I see like the Vikings also, because who knows what's going on with Kurt, how even the Packers, who knows if they want to just go on straight to Love. There's a lot of teams out there, of course, that would love Lamar Jackson, even if they have a franchise QB right now. If you can get Lamar Jackson, unless you have like a Mahomes, Allen, Herbert kind of guy, you're gonna want to take Lamar Jackson. It's just as simple as that. You're a lot of things with the Jets too, of course. So the main thing would just be, are they keeping him? Are they gonna? My best bet would be I want to take a QB in the first, second round. I'm not sure of that. And then they franchise tag Lamar Jackson, and then they just trade him, get a bunch of competition back. Who actually knows of that? No one really knows of that going forward, because there's been a lot of concerns with Lamar's health. See, I know he had a sprained MCL, which was supposed to be the way the Ravens kind of worded it would be a week to week, kind of 2 week, 3 week at most injury, but Lamar Jackson said it would take him 6 weeks from the recover. So obviously this can be another kind of like a Kawhi Leonard situation from the NBA. One of those kind of deals where it just seems that Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore staff have two completely different ideas on what Lamar's health is, and that's another thing that can really kind of jeopardize him coming back. And with how with the lack of receiving concepts, all that stuff the Ravens bring him, I will not be surprised if he wants out. But of course they have all the power because they can franchise tag him. We'll really have to see on that. But the Bengals side, they move on to play the Buffalo Bills. They didn't play their best game, as I mentioned before, but I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. They mentioned of Buffalo and San Francisco. They're playing against the Ravens, who played them twice already, and they had Tyler Huntley at least instead of Anthony Brown. The thing is, they know all the Bengals. They have all the tape now. As I mentioned, they have the full 17 games of tape for the Bengals of all the receivers, Joe Burrow's tendencies. Their defense was relatively healthy. They had both Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters in there. They had everybody ready to go. It's not like they're missing a cornerback or anything like that. But I don't think that you should take that away from the Bengals per se, just because they're playing a divisional rival that has almost all the knowledge they need at this point. They couldn't just hang out at the end, of course, but still. The Bills also had played against a divisional rival and looked a little bit shaky. They play each other. Who knows with that game, just because I mentioned before, they both kind of had similar concepts in their games. They both were in really close games against divisional rivals that were down a QB. So we'll have to see about that. For our last game that we will do a recap on before I head on to the predictions, we have the Dallas Cowboys at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and for me, I'm a big Tom Brady guy. I love his career, love everything he did, but he really might be done. But the only thing is, we've said that like 5 times about him already, but he's always come back. But still, he's 45 years old, and then this whole year was this really off for the whole Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this game really broke the camel's back. The only reason why they played the only reason why they were even in this position, to be fair, is literally just because their division sucked a lot, and they were able to get an 8-9 record, and it showed they were an 8-9 team, even if they did win the division. The Dallas Cowboys, I felt watching this game, did literally whatever they wanted. They ran the ball really effectively. Pollard, especially Pollard, he had some nice moments too, but mainly Pollard. They were able to pass it everywhere. Dak was on fire this game. Dak Prescott was on fire this game. I felt the main thing with Tampa was that they're just trying to be too cute. Their defensive coverages. They're trying to hide things, trying to disguise off things. But Dak Prescott has played against Tampa Bay twice on the last 2 years, and it kind of showed that at this point, with all the film they have on Tampa Bay at this point of their own games and other games, he knew exactly what they were going to try to do against them. And whatever they had, I felt the Cowboys were always one step ahead. And then, of course, the Dallas pass rush with Micah Parsons was absolutely going crazy on Tom Brady. Tom Brady obviously can't move around. He's so old at this point. There was nothing I felt Tampa Bay could do that Dallas didn't end up countering. And a lot of that did come down to coaching. The coaching for Tampa Bay, especially with their offense, was horrible. Byron Leftwich has reports that he's going to be let go pretty soon. So, kind of building off of that, main thing was that Tampa Bay has no running game whatsoever. Well, that's because the coaches don't want to call it, whether it's because their offensive line was hurt a lot of the time, they couldn't just establish it. Who really knows with that? But Tom Brady is, as I mentioned, almost 45 years old, and he's throwing the ball over 50 times. It's absolutely crazy. He's easily had the most pass attempts of almost any quarterback this whole wildcard weekend. And the thing is, the majority of the quarterbacks are like not even 30. Like, they're all young guns, and Tom Brady is so much more older at this point. Obviously, he still has a lot of those fundamentals, all that stuff, but still, the fact he is this old and they're using him 50 times, There was no running game. There was no play action. There was nothing he can just take a kind of like a breathe on the play on. He was always having to pass, and he always looked out of sync with his receivers. But this game especially, this happened again where they had no chemistry, and it just shows like those a lot of games where he said they have no Tom Brady, because he's not. Well, he's not gonna run around like Lamar, or he doesn't have a lot of physical tools like other quarterbacks have. He needs to have perfect timing, perfect rhythm, perfect play design. He needs to be. That's why he is such a workaholic. But this, I don't know if it's because what happened with his personal life or anything like that. But he looked so out of sorts. He just, I feel like whatever play they called, he was expecting a receiver to go to do one route, and then they didn't. I'm not sure what really happened here, but Tom Brady, the whole Buccaneers just fell apart. Their defense could not get anything going. I feel like their defense just fell apart. They had no pass rush, and then that got all data throw. That's why their secondary was getting picked apart. The secondary was kind of suspect, but this game especially, they was getting destroyed by Dallas. And then it just sucks to kind of see we might be seeing the end of the Tampa Tom era. If he goes to another team or if he just retires, who really knows with that? But if Tampa Bay doesn't get another quarterback there, they can be completely done for a while. Kind of going back to what they were pre-Tom Brady, but who really knows with that? Because I don't think they trust Blaine Gabbert or their other second round pick they got a couple years back. I'm blanking on his name right now, but I highly doubt they trust them to kind of take the reins after Tom Brady leaves. But kind of going forward from that, there's really not the only other kind of notable thing that happened, which was kind of funny, was that the Cowboys kicker missed like 4 extra points, and then Jerry Jones went on Twitter and said, if you can kick to go down to the field and they'll get him a jersey. That was like literally the only thing that happened. That was a blow that went Dallas's way, of course. They won this game convincingly, no ifs, ands, or buts. Even as someone who, as a 49er fan, obviously disliked the Cowboys, have to give them credit. A lot of people, including myself, thought they would kind of shrivel up as a lot of times they have gone in the playoffs against a much more experienced team, but that did not end up happening. They won convincingly. Now they get to play the San Francisco 49ers next week. And that kind of leads me to my next point about the prediction side of things. So we'll talk about that right now. The first team I want to talk about would be the Jaguars at the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay. What do I think about this game? The first thing I'm going to say outright is that I think the Chiefs are going to win, but the Jaguars are going to give them the fight of their lives. I feel that Jaguars, at this point, they won their playoff game, especially against the Chargers, who people have them as an underdog against. But right now, they're a really big underdog against the Chiefs. I don't know what the spread is or plus whatever is, but I just know right now, no one's expecting them to win, and I think the Jaguars are just gonna fight, scratch, claw, whatever they have to do. They're gonna keep the game close, much closer than they did early in the season. But I think the Chiefs will win because at this point, Mahomes is literally the oldest QB in the AFC, which is crazy. He's not even 28. That's how young a lot of these new QBs are. But he's already won the Super Bowl. He's made 3 AFC championship games. Andy Reid's had a ton of experience as well. So has Doug Peterson, of course. But I think the experience the Kansas City Chiefs have with their roster is going to help them win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. But even so, I think the Jaguars still have talent. They still have some developing guys. So we have to see how they'll play this game. But they'll keep it really close against the Chiefs. But I still think the Chiefs are going to win, of course. I don't have too much to say about this. Obviously, I think this one is going to be a little bit... I think everyone's expecting the Chiefs to win. But this game is a real toss-up, I feel, which would be the Cincinnati Bengals playing at the Buffalo Bills. And obviously, they were supposed to play earlier in the year, but due to DeMar Hamlin's cardiac arrest, that game got ruled a no contest. So that game was going to be very important. That could have really determined who won the number 1 seed. Probably was, if Buffalo won, it would not been the Chiefs. If Cincinnati won and a couple of things happened, they could have gone in it. But right now, it's basically what that game was supposed to be in the playoffs. And I'm not. This one's a lot more complicated to pick out because it's not like it's obvious that the Jaguars are clear underdog to the Chiefs. I don't feel the same way with the Bengals and at the Bills. And I think the majority of people will take Buffalo as a slight favorite, but I think Cincinnati actually takes the win here. And here's my logic on that. As I mentioned before, the especially the Bills offense with Josh Allen, they play a lot of the time. They play really recklessly. They have fumbles. They just want. They love to absolutely just take shots down the field, and obviously it works a lot of the time to have a top five passing offense. But the main thing about that would be at the same time we saw against Miami, who was banged up on, especially on both sides of the ball, but especially on defense, where they got picked off because Josh Allen was being too aggressive. And I think the Bengals defense, as I mentioned before, they're a very slept on unit. They're top 10. They're very kind of quiet just because the offense has so much star power, kind of takes away from the defense. But if the Miami defense, who were limping in that game, were able to force those turnovers, I think the Bengals defense could honestly do a little bit more work than Miami could. So that's one thing. But I also feel that because they haven't really played each other, I feel with how the Bengals offense goes, with they have a lot of talent with Mixon, Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd. I think that can really start feasting, especially on someone like the cornerback twos and threes with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, because T. Higgins would be almost a lot of other teams wide receiver one come, and he's a wide receiver two because how talented Jamar Chase is. Because of how that kind of works out, I think Burrow would have a lot of kind of favorable matchups to pick apart. And then I wish they ran the ball more, but if they did, and they have Joe Mixon, and even if you want Perine to kind of Samaje Perine to kind of throw the ball to as well, or just hand it off to, because they're both pretty good at receiving and running. So I think they're a little bit more varied when their offense needs to be that way. While with the Bills, they have a running game that's really hidden. There's sometimes I feel they can get like 7 yards of carry. They get nice chunk plays a lot of the times. Also, I feel there's really consistent. There's never a consistent 4 or 5 yards. Always at some points it's either they get stopped at the line of scrimmage every time, or they get a big play. And that's one thing that could really it really concerns me about the Bills, especially against the elite teams they're not to be facing. Because let's be real here, they have to face the Bengals. They're probably gonna have to play the Chiefs, and then they're gonna have to play probably Philly, San Fran, or Dallas. They're gonna have to play against three like super good teams, and not really so much with the Chiefs, and a little bit less so with the Bengals. But if they do make it to the Super Bowl, assuming it's going to be like Philly or San Fran, even Dallas, they'll have crazy good defenses that are not gonna um they're gonna stop the run. Anytime they need to run, they're gonna be able to stop it. They're gonna force Josh Allen to pass. Obviously, he's a great passer. The thing is, as I mentioned before, if he keeps playing that recklessly, those teams also have enough firepower with other weapons. They can really make Josh Allen pay. That's one thing the Dolphins couldn't do, especially with how Skylar Thompson, the Mike McDaniels whole play calling situation kind of turned out. So that's why I think the Bengals actually go into Buffalo and beat them. I think Buffalo will have. I think Josh Allen will have probably a good game, but I think with how Josh Allen's been playing, with how there's some kind of cracks you can kind of see, it's kind of weird because the Buffalo defense is like top five, but so there's some time, especially against the Miami game, where they don't look like that way. And if Skylar Thompson was able to kind of get some like the foundations kind of exposed a little bit, I think the Bengals will be able to take that opportunity and win that game. But moving on to the NFC side of things, we have the Giants at Eagles. This is kind of another game where I think the Eagles are gonna win, but the G-men have obviously played them once fully trying to go at it. Second time, and not so much because they're playing Davis Webb, rested a lot of guys, so we really don't know what they're capable of winning that Week 18 matchup. But still, I think with how the Eagles are a very well balanced team, especially on both sides of the trenches, they'll win this game. But with how the G-men have been playing, I wouldn't be surprised they put up a big fight, just because against Minnesota, they looked really good, really well seen. They probably got their confidence up. But even so, my main thing with that would be they did also play the Minnesota defense, which is like basically at the top bottom five of almost every category. We have to make. I know some people are saying the G-Men will beat them easily or like some upset. We have to kind of slow that a little bit because they played a really soft Vikings defense. Now they're going against a crazy good unit in the Eagles defense. So we'll have to see about that. But of course, one thing about this is that it's a divisional rival, and these games, especially in the playoffs, they played each other already, and now they know each other inside and out, and that could also really help the G-Men as well. So we'll have to see about that, of course. But I think the Eagles are going to win that game. But for my last prediction, we have the Dallas Cowboys at the San Francisco 49ers. I think I believe the 49ers are going to win this game, and it's not just because I'm a 49ers fan. My main reasoning is that the first outside of the actual game, I see the Cowboys fans are giving the 49ers so much bulletin board material, and they did this one chant where they were like, "We want Niners." The thing is, almost every other sport where I seen a team do that to another fan base, another team, like a fan base do that to another team, I should say, it never ends well when they try to call it like the Boston Celtics wanted the Warriors, they got them, they lost that game. I remember Brooklyn wanted Boston, that did not end well. The New York Yankees fans desperately wanted to win against the Astros, they got swept. Then Philly wanted the Astros, and that didn't end up going well. Just the thing is, when you do that, I know for a fact Kyle Shanahan right now, when they're practicing, he's gonna show that. They're gonna show that to the his guys, and he's gonna get them pumped up. And then a lot of the media heads want the Cowboys to win, and they're just seeing a lot of bulletin board material on Twitter. If you look at Skip Bayless, he's saying how Tony Pollard is a better player than CMC. A lot of just stuff like that. He's saying Dak Prescott's gonna light up purdy, stuff like that. And when, especially with how loud, how many Cowboys fans there are, that's gonna travel with the players, and the players really do get fired up about that. So I think that's one thing that we have. But of course, the more football side of the thing would be, I think Dallas is getting a little bit, was getting obviously cocky because they beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But the thing is, obviously they beat Tom Brady. Tom Brady is a playoff demigod. We know that. Well, that's an 8-9 team. Let's not forget that. Let's kind of slow that down a little bit. They beat an 8-9 team that was struggling on both sides of the ball, that had a horrible O-line, that had their defense was playing really bad too. And then now they have to go against the best defense in the league and a great O-line against a lot more weapons than Tampa Bay had weapons. But the thing about Tampa Bay and San Francisco is that San Francisco will run the ball unlike Tampa Bay did against Dallas, and that's what will also set each other apart. And then I think a lot of people are saying, well, Dallas nearly beat the Niners last year, so I think so people are kind of thinking that they'll beat us this year. But my main kind of thing with that argument would just be, well, you almost beat us last year when we had Jimmy G, who was absolutely just choking away the second half, where Nick Bosa got concussed at the end of the first half. And then, of course, you run that stupid play up the middle. That was one thing. And then, but now we have Brock Purdy, who probably is the best quarterback the 49ers had this whole year. We have CMC. We have a lot. The thing about last year also that separates us from this year's that last year, the 49ers absolutely, the only thing that kept them, that won the game against Dallas and the Green Bay was that they ran Debo into the ground. Like, he was getting pitches, kickoffs, short passes. It was because of how banged up kind of the Niners were, and they don't have as much. And then, of course, now they have more weapons than they had last year, but still, they used Debo. They had a crazy usage rate for him, and that's what kind of kept the 49er offense still. They got him hurt, and that's how they lost last year in the championship game. But this year, this is not. People are trying to say that this is the same team. Obviously, they have differences in personnel too, But the 49ers have CMC now. Brandon Ayuk is a lot better with Brock Purdy because now they have a lot more deep routes for him. They have a lot more different routes than just the kind of dump offs Jimmy G or some of the short passes they did. As I mentioned before, CMC is a big game changer because he can line up on the slot and he's a really talented running back. Obviously, he can really do everything. We have Elijah Mitchell too, and then he can be used as like a good kind of he's really good in short yardage situations. On top of that, we also have the main difference would be because Debo's not being used, we have a healthy Debo as an actual wide receiver instead of a Lori does everything kind of guy. And then George Kittle, we haven't even talked about him. And then the Cowboys are relatively the same last year. I believe Noah Brown's a little bit better maybe. But they signed T.Y. Hilton, who's kind of turning into a nice pickup, but their offense has not changed too much. It's a lot more so the only reason why they're not winning the division is because the Eagles played good, but they kind of ran back the same team. Really, that's just kind of how the best way to put it. Obviously developed a little bit, but the Niners have had genuine personnel turnover. The special team is so much better. That's another thing that we have kind of they're not talking about. Ray McLeod is a very underrated return specialist. That's one pickup that no one talked about that we had that we do have that will help us a lot. Danny Gray might be a really good gunner because last week against Seattle he had a couple really nice punt return stops. Obviously they have Kevontae Turpin too, which would be pretty interesting to see how that goes. But still, I think the 49ers are going to win this game. I'm not sure by necessarily what it will be, but I think the way it's going to play is that the up to this point, the closest thing is that Dallas has played the Philly defense, but they haven't played the best defense, which would be us, and I think that will be kind of the difference. And that's why I think the 49ers are going to win this game, because I believe it will be a full, complete win. I don't think it will be one thing or the other, like some other games have been recently. I think all the 49ers, especially with how much talk there is outside, how much things they hear, they're probably ready to go against Dallas. They know this game has a lot of importance because Dallas, we obviously played them last year. We played them a bunch in the 90s. San Francisco had the catch over Cowboys, so we have to see on how this goes, but I think the 49ers are going to win, but I'm not overlooking Dallas either, because they're still a really good team, but it's just based on how the 49ers are on an 11-game win streak, while Dallas struggled in Week 18, kind of beat a very mediocre, bad Tampa Bay team. I think the 49ers will beat them. And right now, we are... Oh boy, we're almost an hour and 20 minutes into this. Obviously, I'm going to cut some takes out from the recording, but still almost an hour 20 minutes of this. I've been going on it for a little bit now, so if you did like the content of this video, if you want to hear more stuff, please subscribe. I'm gonna have a couple more videos coming out more frequently now, and then have another video which will be the recap, just a TLDR version coming out probably later today, hopefully tonight, like on like a midnight at the latest, and then a couple more videos have planned out as well coming out tomorrow, maybe the day after, of course. Yeah, the Friday show. So if you guys want to stay tuned for that and know exactly when I come out, feel free to hit the subscribe button. But Loki is out.